So, right, good evening everyone and welcome to Democracy Talks. This is the first installment of hopefully many more that will come. So today I am your co-moderator. My name is Judy Pham. I am a radio programmer at Radio Regent. And I'm here to introduce you to the first installment of our series, as mentioned. So today we have with us 3 representatives from all 3 levels of government to discuss how our elected representatives can work for you and get things done for you and your community. So what we will do for this discussion is the first half, we'll talk about, just have an introduction from all 3 panelists about what they do and what their office is in charge of. And the next hour will be devoted to questions and answers from the audience about concerns you may have about your community or about things that are going on in the community. And so if you would like to watch this or rewatch this, we are streaming live on our YouTube channel. But if you'd like to catch up on this again, it is on our YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/RegentParksTV. So I'm just going to turn it over to my co-moderator, Kevin.
Thank you, Judy. My name is Kevin Moore. I work with the United Church here in Regent Park, and it's great to be with you tonight. As Judy has said, you can only see 2 representatives. The third is invisible at the moment. He's going to be joining us shortly, and he will be introduced when he gets here. But we have, in order for us to get a better handle on what each level of government does, representatives from municipal, provincial, and federal government, not the elected representatives who you usually see on camera, but the people who usually are back behind the scenes doing a lot of the work and a lot of the hard work in constituencies. And so we want you to get an understanding from them as to how democracy works and how things get done at City Hall and at Queen's Park and on Parliament Hill in Ottawa. And so to my far left right now we have Claudia Calabro. She is one of the constituency assistants to Deputy Mayor Pam McConnell, who is the councillor for Ward 28, Toronto Centre, which is the ward we are sitting in right now. And then to her right is Foz Ashgear. She is constituency assistant to Minister of Finance Bill Morneau, and also the Member of Parliament for Toronto Centre. And so they are going to speak. One of the things we don't have tonight is a representative from either the Toronto District School Board or the Toronto Catholic District School Board, and we felt like we would save that discussion to a subsequent event, because if we had too many people up here, we wouldn't have much chance for questioning and to get into more details. So I'm going to first of all turn it over to Claudia. She's going to tell you a little bit about the work that she does on behalf of Councillor McConnell and in the constituency office, and then we will hear from Foz. And please use the mic. Thank you.
Hi everybody, thank you so much for having me here today. You may be more familiar with my colleague Kelly Sather. She does a lot of the constituency work in Regent, and just wanted to send her regards as well, and also regards from Pam. So I'm a constituency assistant, and what we do in our office basically can range from picking up the phone and hearing people's comments and issues and requests for help, to going to development meetings in the evenings to find out, what a developer might be proposing, and also what the community thinks of that proposal, and then kind of everything in between. So if you don't see us out in your community, we're in the office, and if we're not in the office, we're probably roaming around going from one thing to the next. So that's sort of generally what we do. There are other people who help out in the office too, who focus more on the policy stuff and the committee work stuff that Councillor McConnell does when she goes to City Council or the other committees that she sits on. In terms of the kind of stuff that you should call our office about, I'm sure people are a little bit familiar, but for those who aren't, you can call our office about issues or questions you have about parks, sidewalks, roads, if something's going on with your water, if you have questions about housing. It's a pretty long list, but I feel like those are kind of most of the things that we hear about often. Just today I had someone call in and ask about the new green bins that are rolling out. So a lot of kind of nitty-gritty stuff, and then also bigger pieces about homelessness or the poverty reduction strategy and other stuff like that that the counselor is working on.
Great, thank you so much. So many of the things that touch people's lives every day happen at the municipal level, and probably the level of government that gets the lowest voter turnout at election time, and people pay the least amount of attention to, especially once you get past the mayor. But that's not a good thing because, as you say, there's so many things that affect us. Police, fire, and ambulance are all under municipal jurisdiction, and so any concerns there need to be dealt with at City Hall. So thank you, and we'll have some questions for you. And now Foz is going to talk a little bit about what goes on at Bill Morneau's office, and I think you're going to have a little help from some of your friends in attendance as well. So we're going to pass you the mic. High-tech operation here.
So I have brought this, which basically explains what we do, from immigration to handing off flags and handings and stuff. So mainly what we deal with is immigration, serves Canada with pension, security, income security, GIS, guaranteed income supplement, student loans, we support with that. And CRA passports. So folks come about with regards to all of that. So often enough to kind of differentiate what level of government deals with what. So that's why we make this, to make it so much easier for folks to truly understand what the federal government does. So as you said, my friend is going to help me here, and my colleague Minda, to kind of give us quick statistics of the numbers that we have for immigrations and Service Canada and Revenue Canada as well.
Okay,
So there's the mic.
thank you so much,
Probably
boss.
come up to the mic so
Oh,
we
okay.
can get you on our broadcast. You can use this mic, or you can sit and use this mic. Yeah, that mic will work. fine, sure.
Thank you so much, boss. I have a big voice actually. You can hear me even without the mic. Good evening, everybody. This is my first time to be here in public. Usually, you see me in the office, as Kevin said this evening. Whenever he will go to our office, you can just see half of my body because I'm always at the time in the front desk, and I am the office manager, so I do everything, including actually listening to the issues that our constituents will bring to our office. So right now, actually, since we started our office, we have dealt with about 750 cases, and 69% of these cases were resolved happily by our constituent. Of course, there's a few percentage wherein we tried to help, but we could not really help because there are certain policies and guidelines that we have to follow. So right now, there are only about 39% that are open cases. So among these total cases, 750, there's about 81% that are related to immigration. About 10% related to Service Canada, and that's your pension, GIS, old age, EI including, right, and many things. And 8% is actually about CRA, the Canadian Revenue Agency, because sometimes they come to our office and they will be asking, when are we going to receive our refund? There's tax collection, and sometimes amended T4. So we deal with all those kind of things. The remaining 1% actually is sometimes people will come to our office and they will ask about housing, which is a big issue in this area, I believe. But we try to explain to them that we are the federal, and this is really a municipal or city issue, and we refer them to, of course, to the city. And we try to somehow let them know that there are really 3 levels of the government, and we explain each role of each government so that they will understand. But we will always help them. We have an open door policy in our office. So please come to our office and feel free to give us a call if you need some assistance. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity. Have a nice evening.
You're good. We are pleased that just in time, just in the nick of time, we have with us Chris Drew, who, he worked for Bill Graham once upon a time in the federal constituency office, and then you went to work for George Smitherman, I believe, and then when Glenn Murray became a member of provincial parliament, worked with him for a little while, and now does other things, including a lot of advocacy. So we want to talk about that at some point this evening as well, because now, instead of fielding the questions, you're the one guy asking the questions and going to government with many issues. But what we want you here tonight, because unfortunately no representatives were able to be with us from Bill Murray's office, or from Glenn Murray. It'd be great if we had Bill Murray's office here. Glenn Murray's office, that would be an interesting thing. To talk to us a little bit about what goes on in the provincial constituency office and what kind of questions you field and what kind of issues you deal with there. So take it away, Chris. The newly engaged Chris Drew.
Yes, newly engaged. Only took me 5 years, so I'm relieved. Well, thank you so much, and I apologize for being late. I just completely lost time at work, but luckily I work at Yonge and Dundas, so it was a very quick bike ride over here. I promise I stopped at all the red lights. So thank you, Kevin, for inviting me. It's great to see old friends and folks that do amazing community advocacy work in this wonderful neighborhood. So working for Bill Graham, the Member of Parliament, and then Glenn Murray, the Member of Provincial Parliament, and George, the constituency office, and we have someone here, of course, from Pam McConnell's office, and it's awesome to have the City Councillor's office represented. The thing about a constituency office, it's really a hub of activity. I think when I first started working for Bill Graham, I had no idea about the volume of people that those offices are there to help. And the Toronto Centre ridings and municipal ward has not only a lot of diversity, but a lot of complexity, and a lot of people who require assistance. And it can be a challenging office because there's sometimes not a lot you can do immediately to help people. So the best thing you can do to help people, I think, is usually just be a good ear and listen, and not make people feel like you're rushing them out of there, that you don't have a lot of time for them, or that the office is inaccessible. So you really quickly in those offices need to develop your people skills very quickly, be very patient, be very understanding, because often when people are coming to you, they're coming to you out of a last resort because something's not going well, or they feel like they've hit a roadblock in the federal or provincial bureaucracy, or they literally don't know where else to turn. So you have to be a good listener. You really have to multitask and get back to people. There's nothing worse than hearing in an office or when you're on the campaign trail, I called your office many times and I never heard back. That's a really depressing thing to hear. So you have to do your best to get back to people as quickly as possible. And it's not easy because the volumes are really big. Do you want me to talk a bit about the advocacy that staff do in those offices? Or
Sure.
So the challenge, but the opportunity is that, and I'll maybe just start with immigration because that's a federal issue. And when I was working for Bill Graham, I'm sure it's the same case for Bill Morneau. Something like 90% of the casework that you do is immigration related.
I think we just heard
We heard that already?
81%.
81%.
81%.
Yeah, currently. So
It's a very large number. And so what the role that constituency office staff have there is essentially being a conduit to people's concerns and questions and the federal bureaucracy. And the more you can, again, be patient and explain to people what's happening, because English may not be their first language, the more you can do at being a better communicator, the better you can help people. And some constituents that I used to meet with, sometimes you'd be, take 3 or 4 hours, and sometimes people would be in and out in 10 minutes. So again, you have to spend the amount of time that is required to make people feel like they're being heard. And also be very realistic with people. You really can't get into a situation where you're building unrealistic expectations. If something is going to take 2 years, for example, to process, it doesn't help anyone by giving them any false sense of reality that, well, maybe, the average time is 2 years, but maybe you'll be served in 6 months. Like, you can't do that to people, because they will come back in 6 months and be very upset with you if you misled them. But what I would try and do, and it really only started occurring to me in my later years working there, is when you tell someone, let's say for example, their overseas permanent residence application is going to take 2 years to process from Accra, Ghana, for example. And the other thing to keep in mind is some of these immigration offices have much longer processing times than others, unfortunately. And that's a combination of a whole bunch of factors which I can get into. But what I started to think about is if you just tell someone, look, your application is going to take 2 years, there's nothing you can do, bye. That's really not enough. You really have to think as a staffer what you can do is in terms of value added. So maybe what you can do is encourage that person to stay in touch with your office and come to a town hall meeting, or get connected with some NGOs doing immigration advocacy in the riding. Give them avenues or tools in a toolkit that they can utilize while they're waiting that 2 years. Maybe the Minister of Finance is going to be in town. Now, of course, right now we're in an interesting situation because the Minister of Finance is literally the Member of Parliament. But when Bill Graham was Minister of Foreign Affairs or Minister of Defense, he wasn't the Minister of Finance. So I started to think about ways, or town halls or meetings, where rather than just have one person in a room, you could maybe have a collection of maybe 50 people in a room who all have a similar issue with, let's say it's a permanent resident status application, to really have a dialogue with the federal government about what more should be done in terms of resources. And I would think about this not from a government versus opposition point of view, but really, it didn't matter if Bill Graham or Bill Warner were in government or not. It's not a situation where you really, as a constituency office, should be, let's say it's a Liberal office and the Conservatives are in power, where you just blame the Conservatives and just tell the person, well, there's nothing we can do, we're not in government, blame the Conservatives. Like, that's just not good enough. You have to take a more multi-partisan and actually, frankly, non-partisan approach when you're trying to help people. So I would always try and think of that combination of helping the person on an individual case-by-case basis, but then thinking about grassroots other activities or other things we could do to do, quite frankly, advocacy. And I, in retrospect, there's a lot more I could have done, but I'm now using some of those tactics and tools in the community advocacy I do because I don't work in government or for an elected official anymore.
Before we open it up to questions, and we want you to start thinking about questions that you have.
Love questions.
For these folks, so please think about them because we're going to be looking for them in a minute. You talked a little bit more specifically about provincial jurisdiction when you were working for George Smitherman or Glenn Murray. What kind of issues were you dealing with? Because we've heard from the municipal and the federal offices. What kind of things were you doing there?
So the provincial cases were a little more diverse compared to the federal ones, was my recollection. Now, keep in mind, it has been several years since I worked there, so I apologize if my memory is failing. But whereas before I said something like 80 to 90% was citizenship and immigration related, and the department name has slightly changed because now I think it's refugees, citizenship, and immigration. So whatever they call the department now. So 80, 90, that department for the federal. Provincial was a little more diverse. It included things like worker retraining, and I can't remember, I think it's the second career program type cases. People that obviously had needed assistance with social assistance payments. So any kind of Ontario Disability Support Program. So any program that the government is doing that people rely on, especially in lesser income neighborhoods like certain areas of Regent Park, people are going to come to their MPP's office to get advice in terms of filling out forms, or if a check didn't arrive or a direct deposit didn't arrive. And I know that because of the cost of energy, which has been in the news, the provincial government has rolled out all of these sorts of programs targeted to lesser income folks to encourage them to sign up if they haven't already signed up to get relief on their hydro bills. So I assume that Glenn Murray's office has been trying to help as many people as possible get into that program because A, they might not be aware, or B, they may have heard about it but need help actually filling out the forms. But in my memory of that office, probably the biggest challenge in terms of how to help people or the program that was probably most frustrating for people or that has most of the other questions is the worker retraining program. So if you're in your 50s or 60s and you've worked at a job for 20 or 30 years and you've lost that job, or maybe you're in a job and it's really not going anywhere and you want to switch careers, that can be a challenging program because there's funding restrictions and some bureaucracy involved in actually getting into the second career program and them directing you to a new career where you can actually find a job. So that, in my recollection, was a really sensitive issue where you, again, just like immigration, need to be very patient and sensitive with people's needs because it's a very emotional time when someone loses their job and they need to put their life on hold to train for their next job and then find that job. So that was, in particular, when it came to the provincial government challenge. Obviously, you know, I can't get into more of the policy discussions that the province has to deal with in terms of the city of Toronto, but obviously people would communicate to the provincial office in terms of policy-related issues, whether it was transit, affordable housing, energy, the environment, things like that. People would obviously email or call in tuition fees, call into or visit the MPP's office, or in some cases, occupy their MPP's office on those sorts of policy issues, which I'd be happy to get into if there were questions.
Okay, great. So thank you so much for our speakers. We're gonna open up the discussion with any questions from the audience. I just want everyone to be mindful of the time. So if you have any questions, just try to keep to about 1 minute for your question. So try to be as succinct and concise in your asking. So if anyone wants to ask anything, please stand right up to that mic and ask your question. And make sure you know who you're directing your question to. Okay?
We should also add, if you don't want to be on camera, just let us know. And I think, Judy, you had a question for so maybe we'll start with your question to give people a chance to think of theirs.
Sure, I have a question.
Oh, yep. Come up to the mic, please.
I'll just stay here.
Yeah, but we're recording,
Oh, okay.
so please come to the mic.
This question actually is directed to the city. Right. Working in the constituency office of the federal government with Bill Monroe, we always encounter issues from the constituents regarding housing. They think that because we are the finance minister and we give money, actually appropriation of money for the housing, we are responsible for the housing, right? Having said that, we try to somehow explain to the people the role of each federal government. What's the best way to solve this? Because we refer them to, of course, to McConnell and Tom Wong, and somehow they will come back to us and they would say that, oh, they were really not that helpful. So maybe we can help each other, that you would have a feeling that somehow they are important and their issues are very important, especially when there are no more roof on their heads. So, thank you so much.
Thanks. That's a very interesting question and comment. So often what happens when we receive calls about housing, and you know, when you gave the breakdown of the types of cases that your office deals with, certainly housing is probably the number one call that we get. Whether it's people who live in housing and social housing and they are looking to transfer units, or if they're having a problem with their super or the operating unit for whatever reason, or if people are on the list and they've been waiting. And I think that it's tough because people call the office when they're frustrated. And you know, and I'm echoing sort of what Chris mentioned also, that often you're waiting, often you have to wait and for whatever the issue is, and it can be really frustrating. And by the time people call the office, they're kind of at their wits' end. And our office doesn't have the ability to kind of move people on any list that they're on, and I think that's often what people are looking for when they call the office. They've been waiting for a long time, and they're stressed out, and have totally good reason to be stressed out. There's definitely not enough affordable housing in the city, and as you must know, the city is often coming to the other levels of government to ask for a better partnership to fund those units. So, we recognize it's not something that the city can do alone. And in terms of the day-to-day calls that we get, it's really challenging. And a lot of the time, what we can do and what we do is that we will check in with whatever the authority is that needs to be checked in with. So if you've applied for a housing unit and you have been waiting for a while, we check in and find out, is there anything that's possible that can get you a unit sooner than later? So sometimes we'll suggest that people look at all of the units available to them, all the areas of the city, and maybe add more locations to their list. Similarly with transfers, if people have lived in a certain situation and their family is growing, or they have family members coming to live with them, we will check in and see, what does their file actually look like? Because we know that there's a disconnect sometimes between what you hear through your case manager and what you think, what they should know. So what's on paper is different than what reality says. There have been cases where people have come to our office and said, I have a child who has accessibility needs, and I've been waiting, and how come, nothing's been happening? And then we check in with the case manager, and it's not reflected on their case. So that's really important. And often when people call our office, we'll direct them first to go check in with the case manager, make sure everything that is going on in your life is on your file and reflected. And then beyond that, all we can do is just make sure that people are treated fairly, and that if you're further down on the list, that unfortunately you have to wait, but that we encourage you to keep checking in with us and with your case manager. So it is a challenge. There's not enough affordable housing, and when you're looking for a transfer from one building to another, one place to another, you have to wait until someone moves out. So if people like where they're living, they're probably not going to move that quickly. So it's definitely a challenge, and I would encourage people to keep checking in with us, and we will, to the best of our ability, get them information. But the challenge is we can't, pick people from one place on the list and put them elsewhere. So
Thank you. Thank you so much.
If I could just maybe add some 2 cents to this, or a bit longer, because I love to talk. So I'm glad you raised this issue, because it's lots of memories are flooding back, because I worked for Bill Graham for 3 years between 2003 and 2006. And when I started in 2003, had lots of eye-opening experiences in terms of getting to know the neighborhood. But the housing question, and when we say housing, we're really mostly talking about TCHC, was probably one of the most challenging issues to deal with, because as you well know, you're in that federal office, and there is the jurisdictional question, and it's tough, because you have to work together as the staff of the elected representatives in Toronto Centre, or the ridings that make up Toronto Centre now. You see each other at events. It doesn't matter what party you support. It doesn't matter, for example, if the city councillor literally supported another candidate in that last federal election. You have to drop all of that. You're one team, because the constituents do not care who your bosses like or don't like. They want you to work together and get things done. So we really had to try and work together. So a couple of things. What I would suggest going forward in terms of a constructive idea is that for all the people that are coming into the offices and what doesn't matter what office, what level, raising concerns about housing, I really think there should be, and I apologize if this is already happening, I'm stepping on toes, but I really think there should be some sort of Toronto Centre annual town hall on housing. Housing in terms of the policy. And it should be, reps from all 3 levels of government, maybe invite the media, whatever, but give people a chance to speak their voice and say, look, I need a 4-bedroom because I have children, or I need an accessible unit, and that's just not provided. And, the challenge that you have, and what I didn't realize is when you explain to people, or not explain, when you say to people, well, have you considered living in Scarborough, for example, they would say, Chris, why am I going to uproot my children out of school? Why am I going to leave my friends? Why am I going to leave the commute in terms of maybe it's close and go all the way to Scarborough, an area I don't know, that's completely inaccessible in terms of transit, which I can touch on in a second. Why would I do all of that? Yes, there's a unit, but it's not my neighborhood. And that makes complete sense to me on an emotional level. And I think there's a lot more that needs to be done. The housing issue, since, again, I was there in 2003, it's now 2017, and I wish I had better news. But overall, and I think we've all seen in the media, the housing issue has not gotten better, it's gotten worse. The slight good news is that the federal government has recently pledged more money for housing. The challenge is a lot of that money is back-ended, so it's several years out until more of it starts flowing. It's actually, I think, a lot of it after the next federal election. So there's a lot more we need to do. As residents, there's a lot more we need to do. The elected officials need to continue to constructively work together, but the more events, town halls, canvasses, petitions, in the toolbox that is grassroots advocacy, if the question is there more that can be done in Toronto Centre to engage people, to keep the housing issue alive? Absolutely. And I'll promise I'll end on this. The one example I love to use is the Scarborough subway. It is astounding that that project got funding, because if you look at it from a rational basis, it's terrible compared to the LRT plan. But what it did do an amazing job of is it got all the key politicians at all three levels completely aligned. It then got all three major parties at all three levels completely aligned to support it. So whatever happened in terms of the political magic of getting all those stars aligned in terms of the Scarborough subway, X number of $1 billion for one stop in one section of the city. However that happened, we need that same kind of coalition to develop on housing, because right now you essentially have all three levels in a way pointing fingers at each other for not helping each other. And look, there's nothing you can do to get Kathleen Wynne, John Tory, and Justin Trudeau to agree all together, but there's lots we can do locally here in Toronto Centre. And there's lots more we still need to do in terms of even this neighborhood we're in terms of Regent Park. Although there's shiny new buildings up and more to come, the Regent Park story should not be over when it comes to funding.
Thank you, Chris. I had a great solution for Scarborough. I thought if we wanted just one stop from Kennedy to the town center, we could have just not opened the doors on the RT, right? We could have just went all the way through and we could have saved $3.5 billion for other projects. But that's just my thought. We've talked a lot about housing, so maybe, Claudia, if you don't mind, just a little bit on what's happening here in Regent Park with the redevelopment, where we are at with people being moved out and moved back in, what the average weight is now, any updates that you might have on what was originally going to be this long a project is now this long. Not your fault, obviously, but this is often how these things go. So anything you can do to update us on some of those things. Tragically, I did a funeral a few weeks ago for a woman who lived in Regent Park and ended up in Melbourne as part of the relocation. And that, just to what Chris was talking about, did not go very well at all. So there's a real human cost to this. And so any update you have would certainly be, and I'm not blaming anyone for that, it's just part of the reality of this. So where are we right now with redevelopment?
Sure. So, as I mentioned earlier, a lot of my constituency work is focused in the southern part of the ward, so I can't be super detailed, but I did have some chats with my colleagues, Sean and Kelly, just before coming here to make sure that I had, some info. And as far as I understand, we are approaching kind of phases 4 and 5 that will be happening over the next several years. And from what I understand, the intention is to not have any more movement kind of out of the community. So there should be sufficient space when people have to move from the units they're in within those phases. Once the work is complete, they should be moving back into units that will be theirs, that will be completed. So again, it's kind of a general answer, and I really would encourage anyone who's interested about the kind of nitty-gritty or even the big picture to give us a call and my colleagues who are way more familiar and have been there, since day one can give you some more info about the upcoming phases. But that's what I would say for the next piece. I don't think it's going to be kind of painful in the way that it has been, and we recognize that keeping communities together is really a priority. So I think that that's going to be what happens in the upcoming movements.
Alright, so does anyone else have a question they'd like to ask? Yeah,
Go
just
for
come
it.
right ahead. And are you okay with being filmed? Are you okay with being on
Is there
camera?
a camera?
Yeah, fine.
So really, I guess I'd like to ask Foz and Claudia, I wish that Glenn's current assistant was here. Because here's the question I have, and it relates to this question we've been having. I'm from the Regent Park Neighborhood Association. So lots of folks in our neighborhood have an issue where they have supports coming from all three levels of government. Whether it's pensions, whether it's immigration support, whether it's sometimes in one family, you're all touching what's going on with them. And I'm wondering, when you get a client like that in the neighborhood, what have you put in place to work with each other? Because I see you coming out to community meetings and working there. I see you showing up at the table, Claudia, or Kelly, budget meetings and different things, and Foz, I see you at things organizing. So I'm wondering, how do you kind of gang up with each other to get things done for the people who live here in the neighborhood? Can you talk to me about the process a little bit, and maybe speak on behalf of then how do you interact with Glenn Murray's office since Glenn's folks aren't here?
Thank you for that. We do collaborating work. Basically, like you said, we would receive a constituent who would have, just thinking of someone lost their IDs, they would lose their IDs. I mean, from their citizenship to their driver license. So we can't help them with the driver license. Interior Services is different than Canada Service Canada. So what we would do is that we would connect them with Glenn's office and have them, basically the constituent assistants, work with him, or the individuals work with the individuals, and then get their papers. They get their procurations, so SIM cards, OHIP, and driver license, or any other IDs that they may need to apply for their citizenship or passport, for that matter. So then when they finish their part of their job, then they say, okay, now that constituent is coming back to you, and give them whatever other information that they may need. So we do that way. So there are a lot of work that we do collaborate back and forth. And with the city, sometimes we would receive emails, or we would have people call us and say, someone is throwing the recyclable bins into the recyclable stuff into the garbage bin. And we fly, send an email saying, do you mind connecting with this individual? Because they want a clarification from their super to understand, not to mix the recycle and the garbage, and they'd be like, yeah, no, not a problem. So that's how we kind of go about it. Sometimes we do actually have Glenn Murray's office's consent form, so we have the constituents sign it right there, provide all the information, and just email it to them, and they will be able to then meet up with that person and finish up that part of the job. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I have to say, I feel like we probably do more intake from the other offices than we do an outtake, because I think people are pretty familiar with the fact that a lot of the day-to-day stuff kind of goes through us, and other than kind of the bigger things, like an example that I think we probably connected with your office on was it was like a post office issue where there's a street on one side of a main street that had the same numbers and the same name as the street on the other side, and I wouldn't even know the first person to call at Canada Post to deal with something like that. But if the sidewalk that they're walking on is all messed up, then that's definitely something that we would deal with, and we take those comments sometimes. If people are concerned about cycling lanes that are paint's rubbed off or anything like that, something that we would take, and we do get that kind of thing from Glenn Murray's office also, because people are pretty connected to the more, I guess, like on the ground local constituent issues. I'm trying to think of if there's something that's bad.
Well, I can't help it. I have to jump in. I'm going to expand your question a little bit, if you don't mind. So, in terms of the offices working together, I mean, obviously there's best practices. If I was here from Glenn Murray's office, I would probably say that the people in the other offices have to be my best friends. Selma Zaid, who's now the Member of Parliament out in the Scarborough Centre, when she was my counterpart, she worked for George Swindon and I worked for Bill Graham. The offices have to work well together. Because you're working there on behalf of people. So you have to put ego aside and you have to figure out strategies to work well together. The area where it's a little more challenging is on the policy side as it relates to either the Regent Park neighborhood and what people need and the riding of Toronto Centre, which mixes the two wards. And just from my perspective, I live in St. Lawrence, so I'm part of, provincially right now I'm part of Toronto Centre, federally I'm part of a different riding that used to be Toronto Centre, and municipally I'm in Pam's ward. But when it comes to policy, sometimes there are examples where the provincial and municipal government are not on the same page when it comes to funding. Affordable housing right now is a good example, where the city is requesting more money, the provincial government is saying, we've given you money, so there's a difference of opinion there. But then there are examples where all three levels of government can work really well together, and there was just an announcement yesterday on the Portlands where they're finally going to be spending over $1 billion to clean up the Don River, essentially. And while that might not seem like it will directly benefit, let's say, residents in Regent Park, the overall environmental benefits are going to be quite significant, and that area will have 20% affordable housing. So maybe it will be the case where some people in Toronto Centre or in the Regent Park area who are on that waiting list will be able to get access to that housing one day in the Portlands. But there certainly could be a lot more, and what I would say is there's an opportunity for residents associations and residents and the grassroots citizens to push all of their elected officials to work better together, and quite frankly to get more for Toronto Centre and for Regent Park. That means more money for affordable housing, that means better TTC service, an actual downtown relief subway line. There's lots more money that could and should be spent in Toronto Centre, and we need our levels of government to work well together and to advocate for each other. I'm not suggesting it's not happening now, but there's always the opportunity to do more. And I think anyone who tries to get on the streetcar on Dundas or tries to get on the subway at rush hour or who's on that affordable housing list would agree there's more that can be done for all three levels of government in this community and in this riding working together. So that's just more of a general policy aspect in addition to the question you had about how do you help people individually.
Do you want to follow up, or is that?
The floor is yours. You can ask a follow-up question.
Yeah.
Oh, I think I'll save my follow-up for later.
All right,
Very
sounds good.
Thank you. Chris touched on this a little bit when he talked about getting into the Member of Parliament's office and 80 to 90% of the calls being immigration related, and so I'm sure you never anticipated that when you took the job in the first place. But so that leads to the question, when you entered a constituency office, what was most surprising to you about the work that you were doing? What caught you off guard? Maybe now you think, well, of course, but when you got there, it really surprised you that this was part of what you were doing every day. So we'll open it up to all three of you, whoever wants to go.
I just want to ask it. Oh, sorry.
Immigration and how the citizenship that we have or birth certificates that we have or passports, we take it for granted, and there are folks that are really and truly trying to get their papers, and you get to see or hear or meet with folks that have been here for 18 years, 20 years and have no papers, and they're trying their best to be able to receive those papers, and it's just, immigration is one of the biggest things, and sometimes it's like we take it for granted. We take what we have for granted. We take our health, for granted because there are folks that haven't got health cards. And due to the fact that because they're waiting for their duration to go through the process within the immigration, so they're not eligible for IHIP. Citizenship, it's just one of those major things. So if you were not born here, then it's like waiting to be able to become a citizen. Is literally can be 10, 15, 20 years for a person to become a citizen. And you know, I mean, as an individual, when I came here, it's like I was a teenager when I got my citizenship. So to be able to see that firsthand is just mind-boggling. So, but that's why we, try our best to work truly hard for the folks, and we've closed a huge number, I believe, and as Minda mentioned earlier, the percentage of files that we've worked on, and that's why we try to make sure that we really take it very seriously and accommodate the folks that come to our office.
Others? What surprised you?
Sure. I have to say, what surprised me was the intense output of feeling and thought and emotion and opinion and need. It's just like a river of humanity that you dip your toe in, and it's amazing, and it's terrifying, and it's upsetting, and you're one individual, and you're responding to so many different calls, and you don't really know kind of what's going to come in next. Like, I know the examples I've been giving have been a little bit kind of, green bins and sidewalks and things like that. But it's really an intense job, and you can get up and you can go to work in the morning and be caught up in a debate where people are emailing you and contacting you, and they just have wonderful, amazing, creative ideas, and you can really connect with that humanity. And then there are other days where things go really wrong, and you're talking to someone for half an hour, and maybe they just had bed bugs, and they're if anyone has come close to having bed bugs or had a scare or anything like that, it's a psychological it's a thing. So you're talking to people when they've got things fresh in their minds, and often we're, like I said before, we're kind of the last point where people are frustrated or they've got a lot to say. And so I think kind of what was surprising to me was having to quickly learn those navigation skills. What is it that's needed? Like, what can I actually provide this person with when they call in? Maybe it's a sympathetic ear. Maybe it's first, and then there are steps to action. But I really love that, and it's a really huge challenge. And I know it's kind of a generic answer there, and I'm not kind of speaking so specifically about the issues that we face, but it's as many people call you about one thing, that many people will call you to have the opposite opinion. So trying to balance that and think about how do you actually move forward in a society and a community where there's so many different ideas, and it's very surprising. And the job of a counselor is to take all those pieces in, take all the yes, do that, don't do that, why don't we do this instead, and then go to the people who write the reports and see what the reports say, and really see how do we keep moving forward with the issues that are important to us in our community. So it's a tidal wave. It's amazing and great.
So I'm going to answer again in the federal realm because it was a very intense experience. But so two things that surprised me, and I'll try and be as quick as possible. But it was 3 years of my life, and I loved every minute of it. So the first thing that surprised me is that every day when I would go into the office, I would actually get to travel around the world. And what I mean by that is, hour after hour, 30 minutes after 30 minutes, another individual would come in, and they would be from a different part of the world than the person who just came. So, and because we were interacting with all of the consulates around the world, it meant that we were literally skipping from continent to continent, and it was just fascinating to hear about people's homelands, their family who were still there, and in a lot of cases we got into longer conversations. Just as an example, I probably wouldn't have even known where Eritrea was on the map if it hadn't been for the volume of constituents from Eritrea or Djibouti. So that was a really fun part of the job, I'll say, to learn about people and their backgrounds. And the other surprising part, I guess, was just how rewarding it is on a personal basis it is to help people. And again, maybe you're not able to literally get the relative over tomorrow, but even if you can listen, it's a really rewarding thing to be able to feel like you're making a small difference in someone's life and you're giving back. And I guess the other surprising thing is that for that brief moment, you feel like you're the elected representative. Now, you can't let it get to your head, but for all intents and purposes, that person, when they go to the office, they're not able to meet with Bill Graham or Bill Morneau or Glenn Murray or George Swinton or the councillor because of the schedule and just how many literal constituents there are. So you have to remember that you're actually representing them, but their name's on the ballot, so you can't get too much ego and try and make decisions without consulting people. But in those moments, you are the elected representative, so it's both a burden, a responsibility, but also a great chance to give back and help people. And just as a specific example, in terms of what surprised me, I had to learn quickly because when I started in Bill Graham's office, actually it was funny, when I was interviewed for the job in Bill Graham's office, because he was a minister, I thought that a constituency office did minister-related policy type files. So I, that night, memorized as much as I could about Bill Graham's foreign policy and what the government of Canada at the day was doing in terms of foreign policy. And when I was interviewed for the job, the very first question was, tell me what you know about Regent Park and St. Jamestown, which I hadn't studied at all. But the good news is I was a first-year planning student at Ryerson. Within the first week of coming to Ryerson, they took all the Ryerson planning students, regardless of if they lived in Toronto or not, on a walking tour of all of the key neighborhoods in Toronto Centre. And Toronto Centre, as it stands right now provincially, there's something like 13 diverse neighborhoods in Toronto Centre, and that's just how kind of people have traditionally called them. Within the Regent Park neighborhood, there's layers and layers of diversity. So just because it's called generically Regent Park or St. Jamestown, that doesn't necessarily accurately portray what people think of or how people consider their individual building or their floor or a collection of residents. So I quickly had to switch gears and start talking about the local issues and the local neighborhoods. And that was a good reality check that, Chris, you do not work for the minister, you work for the member of parliament. So get any notions out of your head that you're going to be at these wine and cheese cocktail parties with a bunch of ambassadors. No one cares what you have to think about Canada's foreign policy. They want to know, how are you going to help get my relatives over to Canada more quickly, or how can you help my CPP check come more quickly? I'm a senior on a fixed income. So that was a very quick, sobering and surprising thing. But I'm so glad that I got to work in a constituency office as opposed to a minister's office for most of my time, because quite frankly, and this is just my personal opinion, it can be much, much more rewarding to help people every day in a constituency office than it can be to sit behind a computer in a minister's office. It's an important role, but it can be different. And the constituency office and the councillor's office is incredibly valuable to the day-to-day livelihood of people.
Chris mentioned how you're connecting with consulates. We cannot do that anymore. That
Oh,
stopped
really?
8 years ago. So we we cannot do that anymore. So that's been put to stop of 8-9 years ago.
Yeah.
And so, but right now, connecting with CIC, the Immigration and Canadian Immigration and Citizen does most of the work. So they're the go-between people. So they would
Right.
forward information, whatever questions that constituents have, find out updates on files. So they forward that, and then you receive an email based on that.
That's a challenge.
So we cannot do that. But yes, the beautiful part is that when families come and families reunite,
Yeah.
it's just, and they come to see
They come to
you,
visit, yeah.
visit and thank you for it. It's
Yeah.
just beautiful, beautiful feeling. Yes.
Absolutely. Totally agree.
I didn't want to miss the opportunity to mention also that definitely within our office, we support one another and we connect with the other constituency offices, but our work is really supported by the city staff as well.
Yeah.
And I wanted to mention that the city of Toronto tries hard, probably not hard enough. I will give everybody that, to engage people. But there are lots of different ways to get involved beyond just contacting the constituency office for, your day-to-day issues. And I would say, plug in and find out what else is going on in the city. Maybe not necessarily in your backyard, but a couple neighborhoods over. There's a lot of stuff going on. And the clerk's office has put together a really great resource. If you search My Local Government Toronto, you can find a really great handbook that kind of explains the more ins and outs of how is policy made. What do you do if you you don't just want to contact your counselor if you want to become the counselor, or if you want to join a board and start making decisions on behalf of your community as well. So again, my local government, if you search that with the City of Toronto, you'll be able to find a lot more info about how to kind of plug in beyond just the constituency office and the local counselor. Because it's not just Pam, you know, it's thousands of staff that are there to support you as well.
So I just want to clarify, the website for that My Local Government is toronto.ca/cityclerk.
Yes, you can find the report there. Yeah, but if you Google my local government, City of Toronto, it should come up. I tried it before. So.
Okay, great. So does anyone else have a question?
I have a question.
And are you okay with being on camera?
Yeah, okay.
Okay, great. Floor is all yours.
I was wondering what the various offices are doing to address the disproportionality of Black incarcerated youth.
We only have 2 offices we can hear from because Chris doesn't work for anybody, but yes,
I can give you my
please,
opinion.
yeah.
And what way the office would be involved in.
That's a very good question,
Yeah,
Dini. That's an amazing question. To be honest with you, our office hasn't personally dealt with people being incarcerated, other than when it comes down to the PR card, or you know, I mean, as many of you are aware, when people start committing, running into the law, and they are actually been found guilty and have to spend some time in prison. What often happens is that depending on the number of times that they've actually have been charged, they get to a place where they are considered, lack of better words, considered I just can't find a word for it. Sorry.
Inadmissible?
There you go.
Yeah.
Admissible. So then the PR card, if they're not citizen and if they're not Canadian-born, their permanent residence cards get pulled out and they get deported. That's how I have I've dealt with trying to get support those the folks, but unfortunately we really haven't had anyone coming in to our office inquiring about people getting incarcerated and how to support them.
Sure. I mean, certainly, I think it comes down to how can I say this? I guess obviously there's different levels of government that deal with different things, and certainly, you know, in terms of people ending up in jail, the police have something to do with that. They're the ones who are enforcing the laws or making judgments in a lot of cases. And so I think that a lot of the time, the work at the city level, because we, I guess from the councilor's office and also just at the municipal level, don't have too much control over the laws in and of themselves and the court systems in and of themselves. We really have to look at anti-Black racism as kind of the starting point. And the city has recently put forward a campaign to kind of unearth and bring to light the fact that this is still a really serious issue that's pervasive throughout, you know, every realm: housing, employment, things like that. So, from my perspective, I think from our office's perspective, that's kind of the starting point, and everything follows from there.
I'm just going to weigh in with my personal opinion because I don't work in one of the offices. But in some ways, I can be more blunt in my personal opinion. So it's a really important question. I'm glad you asked it. And I think as Canadians overall, for some folks, there might be this perception that because we're Canada and not the U.S., that we don't have to worry as much. Because obviously, we know what it is. We know the statistics in the United States where you know that there's a complete mismatch between the African American population in terms of the population and the amount of people that are incarcerated. But we can't get, as Canadians, lulled into a false sense of security that it's much worse in the United States, so we don't have to do anything in Canada, because it is a challenge. in Canada. And I guess there's two aspects of it. There's the risk that people will be incarcerated, and then how to help people when they've been incarcerated and then when they leave, and how to ensure that the reincarceration rate is as low as possible. So that's a spectrum of programs and services and prevention that needs to happen. And if the question is enough of that happening now? No, I don't think so. And as was mentioned up here, all of the work that the governments need to do more of in terms of anti-racism needs to continue. One particular thing that I recall working in the offices is certain communities were very adamant that their youth needed jobs in the summer, and that was not only good in terms of saving up for college, university, or getting job experience, but also kept them occupied in the summer so that they would have things to do and be busy. And if the question is, can the governments do more in terms of youth employment? Absolutely, they should and need to do it. And I think that there should be more town halls, more meetings like this, and other things in terms of bringing these issues to the table, in terms of racism town halls, in terms of anti-racism town halls, youth employment strategies. The more people meet and organize in person, I think the better, and there can be good outcomes, getting media attention on those issues. Just in terms of, again, a macro policy thing that's going to happen, it's going to be very interesting to see if there's any positive outcomes to what the federal government is doing on marijuana, and if that will help, because obviously for too long people's lives could be ruined for marijuana if they were caught with very, very small amounts. And ironically, I have friends and know people that will do it recreationally all the time, and if they were ever caught, maybe their lives would have been ruined because of it. But there were people who were caught because of that, and their lives were being extremely adversely affected for the rest of their lives. So it'll be interesting to see what's going to happen when the federal government addresses that, and it's going to happen very quickly in terms of that particular federal government issue. But as I was saying earlier, if someone's been incarcerated and then can't find a job, that's a significant challenge. And the question is, what is the provincial and federal governments doing to provide the supports and services for people so that they can find the jobs they need? And ironically, in the United States, I've actually seen some interesting documentaries and programs where maybe it's because they have such an acute problem, but there's actually some really interesting examples of employers purposely going out and hiring people that have had criminal records and have been incarcerated. They're given a second chance, and then the comments from the business owner or the managers is these are folks who actually are the best in terms of being on time, in terms of productivity, because they value having a second chance. So maybe there's more work that needs to be done in terms of directly encouraging employers to hire people who have been incarcerated. TD Bank, for example, what percentage of people are they hiring that have been incarcerated? Unfortunately, we don't have as many statistics as I think we would like to be able to track this kind of stuff, and we should, but I'm glad you raised it, because I think there's lots more we can do. Sure. Okay.
Speaking of the summer jobs, we've started the Canada Summer Jobs. The government started that, so it comes through every summer. And nonprofit organizations, the government provides them 100% funding, and nonprofit organizations are provided with a 55% funding in order to hire youth during the summer. So we actually do pick up the phone and call all of the agencies and businesses and ask them if they've applied it. So it's something to take advantage of, and in order to hire youth, and only organizations and non-profit organizations that be able to take part in this are the ones that are actually intentionally hiring youth.
Yes. You have a question over here? You have it? Yes.
My name is Elfrida, and I'm glad that you guys talk about immigration. For the past few months, I met this young man, and I do believe he just came in this country maybe about 3 years ago, wife and a daughter. And he said I remind him of his mom, so he called me mom. And every day I saw him, we would talk about how much he misses his mom. And because he's working part-time, his wife is working part-time, he do not have so much. They saw was a bit maybe to send for his mom. I said, why can't you send for your mom? And I said, are you a Canadian citizen? He said, no, but I have my paper. I don't know if it's a London paper, but he had a paper. Even this morning I saw him when he was crying and said how much I miss my mom. And I gave him my address and said, could you meet me 2 o'clock? Or call me 2 o'clock when you leave work. So far I did not hear no calling. And I'm sorry that he did not call because he would end up in this meeting and get to understand. When he told me maybe he's in the country maybe about 3 years, I said maybe it's London. I did not ask that question. But I remember there's a time policy here in London, 3 months, 3 years. Then you can apply for your children, your families that you left home. Is that still existing?
Thoughts?
We're talking about parents and grandparents sponsorship or having them to come and visit.
Yeah, or come over to live, I think.
The thing he had on to hand it yesterday was his father, if his mother and father can't come. He used to talk about his mom, but now he's talking about, can I send for my mom and my father? And I even promised him I'll try to find somebody, talk to someone, and see what they can do, or they give him some encouragement, also that maybe if there's some answer for it.
So there is a parents grandparents sponsorship once a year for his parents,
His mom and dad,
grandparents. Yes.
Mhm.
So that is what that actually comes through once a year, where people submit their sponsorship for parents and their grandparents if they are intending to sponsor them. And so therefore, right now, as of January this year, it started that there is a profile people submit, and once they submit that profile, 10,000 people will be chosen out of that profile because everybody submits the application. And so in order to be able to, then once people are chosen from that profile, then they submit their application. And yes, he is able to sponsor his parents, but if he's a PR, or if he's a citizen.
What's the PR?
Permanent residence, landing,
Yes,
yes.
I do believe. Anyhow, I know where to send them.
Yes.
Send him to our office.
Tomorrow morning, I
Yeah.
know where to send
He's
them.
gonna see her in the window, and then eventually you'll get an appointment to see someone. So
Yeah,
thank you
I'll
for the
send it
question.
straight to you because it's in that area.
Yeah.
One more thing, my name is Elcida, and I'm the founder for the Dreamer Peace Garden in Regent Park for all who lost their life through violent accident. And so far it is located at 40 Oak Street, CRC. It's funny, but I want to know who could I speak to. I heard about Kevin,
Yes,
but I don't know if he's the right Kevin I'm talking to.
hopefully.
So I want to know, could be a sign put up in there to say no smoking, please respect him there. We are mothers
Yeah.
that lost their children, and I do not know if they know the meaning
Yeah.
of that garden.
Can we talk afterwards? I'll make sure to give you my card so we can sit down and talk. And I work out of that building. I don't have control of that space, but I'll work with you to see if we can't try and get that changed so that people can't smoke within the Peace Garden. I think that's a wonderful idea, so I promise I will work with you on that, if that sounds all right to you.
In the first part that was existed when we talked, and I can't remember the person from City Hall that we sit around the table, and he promised me that he will give me 4 benches in the circle, and I told him it's okay that we can go inside there and relax, and also 4 gates, and that he would put on gate and lock it, and I said no, don't lock it, let it to be free, just like our children them die. Just let it be free.
Sure.
We want to remember our children then.
Yeah.
And if we want to go inside there to sit down and relax, I'm the one that cleaned the garden and doing
know.
everything inside there.
I know.
Okay? And I have a lot of cut.
Yeah.
And I would like it to paint back in blue, just like what I saw in my dream. It's no one put it to me. That's what I closed my eyes and I saw. and shouting, oh my God, these are children that died through violent and accident. And that Monday morning I get up.
Yeah.
And I went to Albert Cook and he said, go and make it anywhere. So that's my baby.
Yeah.
And all over the city that our children have been murdered, I go there. East York, I go to Scarborough, all over Last of Us as mother together, Jane and Finch Place that I never know, to support those parents, take course, bereaved family, that we can help and support each other. And I would like that support also in that garden.
Yeah. Well,
Respect.
let's talk after, and I'll work with you on that. I promise you. Okay. Thank you.
And I'm sending that young man to you.
All right. Good. We're getting close to.
We have something.
We have a question. Yes.
Yeah, it's just that we.
Come to the mic so we can hear your question.
It's a clear question, it's just a comment.
Yeah. Or even your comment.
We really tried our office to be accessible to everybody. So when you call today, we make you an appointment right away, and we have also a walk-in day on Wednesdays. We have somehow changed somebody's life, and we brought a person here tonight to share how his life has been changed. So
Come on up.
please welcome Aki Amgar, maybe 3 minutes
Yeah.
sharing the experience, how your life was changed. Amgar, please.
Come on up.
Hi everyone. My name is Amjad Mohammed. I came to Canada as a refugee claimant from Sudan in 2012. And okay, it's hard for me to talk on that.
Take your time. Don't worry about it.
I came from Sudan as a refugee claimant in 2012. I had a deportation. I was scheduled to get deportated back to Sudan, and I think last October. And I lost hope, and 2 days before my deportation, I went to my MP's office, Bill Morneau's office, and I talked to someone there, and he was like, I know your situation, but it's too late now. And I told him everything about my story. It's a long story. I can't really, it will take a long time, but he told me, he was really supportive, but he didn't have anything in his hand. And I left. I was getting ready to go back to Sudan. And a few hours after, I had a call, and the same person is like, you know what, can you bring me your paper and we can try and we'll see what's gonna happen. 2 days late. It wasn't even a complete 2 days, it was a few hours. And after, the day after, before my deportation, and I had a call, and with the effort and compassion of the people working there, Minda, Foss, and AJ, who's not here today, my deportation was dismissed. And so it was the best decision I could have made, because today I have a temporary resident permit with a study and work permits, and I'm looking forward to get my citizen, and I'm still working with them and they're still helping me. So there is not enough words that will explain how I feel about that. So thank you. I want to thank Bill Morneau's office and his team for doing what they always do, which is help people to always see the bright side of life. I want to thank them for seeing me as a human, as a person, before seeing me as a client. Thank you so much.
And we say also, May I add on to that one, please? Just very quickly. Amgad came to our office, and to be honest, we don't even know his phone number. And we were talking, the three of us, Pause and AG, said like, how are we going to get in touch with this person? So we remember that the Canadian torture for victims, right, called us, and we called them. And the secretary said like, who is this person? We do not know. But somebody called Bill Murray's office just an hour ago, and we need to speak to that person. I said, that's impossible. There's so many people here. So I said to them, look here, I'm calling from Bill Murray, your member of parliament, and the finance minister. If you have to go from one person to another person to ask who called our office, I will wait. And to be honest, in a few minutes, somebody called and she said, I was the one who called your office. We need to have the contact person, the contact number of this person. I said, oh, I will check the reception. There was no phone call. But fortunately for Amir, this lady dig out his file. And I think after 3 calls, she was able to get in touch with him. So we told him I did come back to the office. And believe me, 3 of us, we did not sleep that evening. We were just calling everybody. And then Saturday, we jumped with joy because deportation was there.
Amjad didn't do us a favor. He came in 4:30 Thursday night, getting deported Saturday 4 o'clock in the afternoon. So we did not have a whole lot of time to work with, but with our counterparts in the immigration office really did a miracles. And by Friday, 5 o'clock in the afternoon, when we were 5:30 in the afternoon on my way to home, when I received the call from my colleague AJ saying the deportation has been stayed, that was just beautiful. Beautiful. It was a great weekend for that. So. Thank you for sharing that, Amjad.
Thank you so much for that. Why don't we end the Q&A with that beautiful note? So we'd like to thank everyone in the audience for participating, and we just want to ask our panelists, do you have any closing remarks? Anything you want the audience to know or the people who are viewing online?
Well, I just really quickly, it occurs to me that the number one, and I'm sure people who everyone will agree, is word of mouth is an incredibly, in this neighborhood and in Toronto Centre, incredibly powerful and effective ways. So if there's people out there, as we've heard tonight, who need help or maybe don't know what their elected representatives can do, spread the good news, or if someone mentions, I've got this problem, I don't know what to do, direct them to the offices. Word of mouth is way more powerful than any social media advertising, anything in the newspaper, anything like that. Word of mouth is critical. So, and it was very touching to hear the stories tonight. And I'm sure that the good news will spread fast in terms of the help that and the listening ear that the offices can provide. So, thank you for including me today.
Thanks, thank you for including us as well. I guess I just want to say that we love hearing from people. We hate to hear from them when they're in a crisis. So if you want to call us when you just have some thoughts and ideas as well, if you're walking around your neighborhood and you notice something, give us a call. Tell us about that thing. If you have an idea, we want to help you realize it. If you have ideas for our offices to work better together, we'd like to hear that. But otherwise, get in touch. And like I said, we can connect you with a lot of different parts of the city, as well as try to figure out, if something's going on that's not quite right, we can try to help you out with that too. So basically, just to echo what Chris said, we want to hear from you for everything, good, the bad. Just give us a call.
Our office is probably the closest. We're just north of Gerard, and as has been mentioned before, honestly, just come in, even if folks are not aware of what government works with, whatever issues or concerns that they may have. We're more than happy to provide that information and let them know that whether it's municipal, whether it's provincial, or whether it's us. As Sid mentioned earlier, I've brought this, which basically has all these wonderful things that we do in our office. And yes, we would love to also hear from you and also provide, to be able to provide whatever necessary informations that are there. I've also brought the recent from 2015, 2016, all the things that have happened within the immigration and all the changes, wonderful changes, and the future, what things would, what will happen in the future. So please take a look at this, and any questions that you have, I'm sure there will be ways that we're able to answer it, and contact our office. Thank you for having us as well. Thank you.
Thank you so
Thank you,
much.
Linda, for helping out as well.
Thank you to all of you. We didn't get to it too much tonight, or really at all. Chris has been out of 3 or 4 years, I guess, since you worked in the constituency office. He finds himself a lot of time on the other end of the equation these days. He's an avid cyclist. Some would say crazy cyclist, but I'll say avid cyclist. Chris and I rode bikes through the streets of Guadalajara together a couple of years ago. It was part of their Open Streets program, which is now Council in Longtam is really trying to introduce to Toronto. It's an uphill climb, so when you see it and hear about it, come and participate. It's an amazing program. But Chris also, when they took the bike lanes out of Jarvis Street, I think was there physically in the way of those that were trying to do that. And I know he's been a huge advocate for transit in Brampton, and I think you were in Hamilton not too long ago. So we need to get him back and talk about how to be heard at City Hall and at all the various levels of government. We should also tell you that tomorrow, Friday, which is the 30th June, yes, there will be a tour of Queen's Park. You can meet at Yonge Street Mission at 2:30 p.m. 306 Gerrard Street East at 2:30 p.m. There's room for 30 people or something like that. Yeah, and so call ahead to register, call Yonge Street Mission, or call Glenberry's office. And we don't have the number in front of us. If someone wants to look that up quick, we'll give it to you before we go. And Zara, I think, will meet you, and Glenberry will show you around Queen's Park. And also Saturday at the big park in Regent Park is the Canada Day Party and Barbecue. There are invitations there. Bill Marneau's office is putting that on. Come and tell Foz what a great job she's doing, and enjoy the Canada Day celebrations. Canada 150 Plus, we are calling it. This event tonight is part of this week-long emphasis on Canada 150, and that kind of leads me to my final point that we want to do a series of these. I hope you found tonight informative and helpful. I certainly was enjoying hearing what people had to say. We heard talk of maybe a summit on housing. That sounds like a wonderful idea, to get all 3 levels of government here to talk about housing. And the 100,000 names or so that are on the waiting list, I forget what the number is. It's a ridiculous number. We have a number for Glenberry's office. And here it is. I'll make it bigger so I can read it. 416-972-7683. And there's an email, very long email. If you want the email, come and see us after. I'll read it out. You'll never get it all. So 416-972-7683. If you come and see Judy, she can give you the email afterwards. And perhaps something on housing. We're going to meet in a couple of weeks to talk about this event and talk about what we can do next. Something around school board is another one that we've talked about, and just a series of events on how you can communicate with your elected officials, how you can get involved. Claudia mentioned that booklet. I think we have copies of those available. I know Daniel Bondi had some, so I think we can get those. And you can serve on boards at the city. You can volunteer. There's all kinds of ways. Deputations. Yeah, which a bunch of us did around Blevins Place and that building that was brought down, that wasn't going to be brought down. And so the voices from this community, Deanie, you were there, I think, as well, weren't you? Yes, you were there, and so it makes a difference. So there's lots that we can do. thank you so much to our 3 participants. Like I say, they're usually not in front of the mic. They're usually in the back of the room while their elected officials are doing most of the talking. So nice to hear from them. Because when you pick up the phone and call the constituency office, Bill Morneau or Glenn Murray or Pam McConnell are not going to pick up the phone. These folks are going to pick up the phone. They're going to talk to you. They're going to do what they can to help you. And if you need to speak with the elected representative, they can make that happen. But they're just, my experience has always been that they're there and they're helpful, and we should applaud what they do, because government wouldn't work without them. So thanks for coming. I think there's still some more snacks there if you want them, and we'll talk to you soon. Have a good evening.